And so there were elements that I thought, that's really good.
Do more with it. Do more with it.
Exactly. I am Teresa. Welcome to Cocoon Cast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today we'll be discussing the new movie Golda, and for a retro rewind, the 2015 Woman in Gold.
And we also have some surprising Hollywood news.
Dune is deserting their 2023 release date.
Great, let's get started, Rebecca.
Golda Meir has risen through the ranks of her fledgling government to sit at the top at age 71, maintaining a tenuous peace on the world stage for her people. However, that peace is put to the test as a coalition of countries openly declare war on Meir and her cabinet. With time running out, and the coalition receiving advanced technology to aid them, Golda must choose. Will she sacrifice her people to win the war, or will she surrender to international pressure to keep the global peace?
Rebecca, let's talk about why we chose this movie.
Golda Meir is a very controversial figure, to be putting it lightly. So I was really curious to see how this movie would tackle her more human qualities. There's also a really interesting creative team involved with this. The director of this movie is one of only 2 Israeli filmmakers to win an Oscar.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that I did not know. And right, Golda came to power when I was just a kid. And so I remember probably about this much, but it's definitely within my lifetime. It predates you a bit. But you're right, it wasn't a biopic, and I thought it may have been a biopic. I didn't realize it was only just the small period, the 19-day period of the war, the Yom Kippur War.
The war is still very fresh for a lot of people my generation because, say, their grandparents fought in this war. Even their great-grandparents may remember the founding of the state of Israel.
Yes.
So it's kind of interesting to see how it takes events that people in that generation remember as iconic and kind of parse them down to almost a more personal level with Meir and her cabinet.
And obviously it wasn't a biopic, and it was such a small period, and I had shared that surprised me. Did that surprise you also, or were you expecting it to be more just a short time period?
I was expecting to focus definitely on the Yom Kippur War for a large portion of the movie based on the trailer we saw. Sure. The only thing I knew going into this movie was the casting. Mm-hmm. And I want to our cinema community to comment down below. Do you think this casting was appropriate for the characters being portrayed? But also, do you think that they were able to handle the material well?
Well, and one of the controversies is, right, Helen Mirren is not a Jewish woman, but plays a very Jewish woman.
This is the 3rd time.
Exactly. So I would be curious if like you said, as our cinema community, how do they feel about that? Do they have an opinion about that? Also, as you were talking about, do they remember the war? Do they have family? How did that impact them?
I'd also be curious to see if that impacts our cinema community's perception of the film once they go see it, too.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a great point. And I know we had talked about the screenplay and your expectations going in. I know we had talked a little bit about that off camera.
I was expecting a more tightly written screenplay. There were some points where I felt like the framing device of this story was only useful for one moment, and that's near the end. I feel like if they would have dove into it, I feel like it could have been a more impactful film. That was my main complaint with most of this movie, is it felt like it shied away from moments that really could have been impactful, and instead it just minimized them.
Well, I don't know if it minimized. The movie was 1 hour and 40 minutes, so relatively short compared to some of the movies that we've been seeing more that were well over 2 hours. I think 1 hour and 40 minutes was about the length that it needed to be, maybe even a little bit shorter.
This movie felt long.
It felt long, and we were talking about that. It felt flat.
I think maybe the potential reason for that might have been that this is a PG-13 rated movie.
Oh, okay. So you're thinking if it would have been a R-rated, it would have dove in a little bit deeper into what aspects?
I think the biggest thing for the story behind this film is that this is an incredible loss of life for a new country.
Absolutely true.
There's some talk at the beginning of the film of the 6-Day War, which was considered a decisive victory.
Yes.
In one area by all parties involved. This is a little bit more nebulous. Most of the government of Israel basically had to pick up the pieces after this event happened.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost a turning point in saying, yes, we are fallible. And I think that would have made more of an impact. If this had gotten an R rating, we could have seen more deeply. It's hinted at in several scenes, but I don't really feel the impact. Everybody feels nameless and shapeless in this moment. And when you have characters' key motivation being, we're losing lives, we can't do anything, you need to feel that as the audience.
Well, and I don't disagree with that. I felt, I mean, Golda is a very, she's since passed, of course, but she's a very big person. And it felt that they had not minimized her, but her bigness in the room, her power, her personality felt very much downplayed. And at one point we were talking about her iconic shoes, which is, a thing for her. But it felt like they would throw little things in there like, oh, okay, that's nice to know about her shoes. And I'm thinking, well, I wanted to know more about her. They gave a little bit like her being, raised in the UK, or excuse me, the Ukraine. That was helpful if you didn't know that. But it felt like there could be more. Obviously, her chain smoking was a piece. Her going through her cancer treatment.
There's a lot of smoking in this movie.
I know. And
it's very common in that time
period. Well, I
period.
was going to say, you grew up in the 70s. That actually was a thing. Unfortunately, it was a thing. And I don't know. It felt like it just felt too simplistic for her. And as you said, when she was going in and they were asking her lots of questions to determine her culpability or her, right. And it was one of those things where they didn't really dig deep into it.
I feel like that format could have been used to kind of provide perspective on several moments.
Yes, agreed.
That could have been more powerful. Like if they would have shown her in that moment.
Yes.
And then cut back to it, and she would have kind of minimized it. It would have shown how she's changed as a person.
Well, and
then that last moment would have been more impactful. I don't want to spoil it because it's a good lead up, but I felt like it's a waste of storytelling space.
Well, and you and I had talked about anytime you write a book, anytime you read a story, anytime you write a movie, you have to make creative decisions. You can't cover everything.
But there's also economics in storytelling.
Yes.
Everybody has to have a reason for existing. If you don't have a reason for existing, why are they there? It makes the audience lose focus. And that's one of the things that really annoyed me with this film.
That it just watered it down.
It watered it down. I was very impressed with the attention to detail. Everybody was named with the exception of Golda's aide. I had to do some auxiliary research to find out who that was.
Correct.
Which was kind of disappointing, but that's
no,
neither here
well,
nor there.
And they did. They were very intentional. Names and titles were actually on the screen, so they wanted you to know.
It's very cohesive. I was really impressed at the cohesiveness of the integrity of the information being presented.
I agree with that. I think that's important because you hear names. I'm sure you've heard names over the years. I think it was helpful to have that.
It helped me definitely. I mean, it's one thing to open a history book and just go, this person, this person, this person.
Agreed.
But it was nice to see them interacting with Golda. And I also like how it didn't sanctify Golda either. It pointed out her flaws.
Well, and to me, one of the standout pieces to me was her humanity. She was tough, she was strong, she was decisive. Her decisiveness was reflected in casualties, and her lack of decisiveness, casualties. Clearly, neither one of us have been in that situation, so we offer a lot of, respect for making decisions like that for your country. However, the toughness was a little watered down, but there were spots of humanity. You saw little tears. You saw her reaching out to different people and her connection with them. So there was a humanity piece to it, which I did appreciate.
This film is named Golda for a reason. It is focusing on her, but I feel
correct.
like it's also the minute you bring other people in, you are forced to recognize their perspective, and I feel like the filmmakers didn't do that as much. There's a key scene with a loss that becomes very personal to Golda, and all you see is Golda's face.
Yes.
And all you hear is another character reacting to this loss. And I think in the hands of another director, that could have been cheap and trite.
Yes.
And it's not the choice I would have made, but I feel like it respects Golda's point of view.
Well, and exactly it. It's not narrated, but through her eyes, you see everything that's happening.
There's a lot of use of reflections in this movie.
Well, and the cinematography actually helped communicate the message that sometimes the movie wasn't otherwise through the screenplay. Yeah, I think it was a good movie. However, like you said, it was flat. At times it was boring, truly.
Yeah, I think a lot of the auxiliary creative team, like Dasha Dauenhauer for the music and
That was good.
Jasper Wolf for the cinematography, did a lot of heavy lifting that this movie otherwise wasn't, I wouldn't say not equipped to handle, but just didn't want to reckon with.
Correct. It didn't go there. I know it sounds kind of cheesy, like, oh, they didn't go there, but they truly didn't go there. And the actors were good. The casting, I thought, was reasonable.
I wish they would have taken more risks with this movie.
That's a great way to say. I appreciate that. I think that's the word.
This movie is safe other than the music, other than the cinematography, in almost a boring way to me.
Correct. And safe can be interesting, but in this case, it didn't feel that way to me either.
This movie just felt really dry to me. And I like dry movies, but if you're coming into this hoping that there's a little bit of meat, you're hoping that the characters are wrestling with these things instead of some moments feeling like a brush off.
Well, and there were a few lines like Henry Kissinger, when he said, his line when he was sitting with Golda at the table, that was powerful. You and I both kind of looked at each other and said, wow, that was good. But even him, I mean, his role was just a little flat too. And I don't think, again, it was the acting. I do think it was the script that had the biggest problem.
Sometimes the script didn't even know what to do with Golda. And it's like,
that's true.
If you don't know what to do with the main character of your movie, the audience isn't going to either. If your audience is running around in circles, that's just going to confuse your audience, annoy your audience, and alienate your audience. And that's one thing you don't want them to do in a very serious topic like this.
Well, and to be clear, I hear you saying it was boring, right? I'm saying the same thing.
I find these events fascinating.
That's what I want to point out, that it was boring because it was a historical movie. It was boring because, it happened back then.
This is so far away from when I'm living now.
Correct. Right. It's not relatable. We love history movies. We love documentaries.
We are openly invested in the subject material of this movie specifically.
100%.
And I am bored.
and that's painful. That's painful because
I am slumped over in the chair just going,
yeah, no. And we've talked about kind of the slump, because the slump is a real thing. And if you're slumped over, and honestly, I was engaged. I was entertained, as crazy as that sounds for a war movie. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. It's weird. It's hard to go, I enjoyed it, but I don't know if I liked it.
And I'm not asking for violence' sake, like, ooh, dead people. I'm asking for engagement with your material.
Correct. And that's what we were missing.
Yeah, I was talking with you on the ride over to the studio.
Sure.
And I said there were enough details to keep me engaged, but nothing to really entertain me, to keep my focus, to hold my focus. I'm just like, oh, they did that again. Oh, that's kind of an interesting motif that they're going through as filmmakers.
Well, the one thing I will say for the movie is I didn't feel lost, meaning I knew where they were in the war, not because they just put the date on there, right? I mean, clearly I could figure that one out.
It's very respectful, too.
Well, and they would show the map, and they said what they were doing, and you would hear the voices from the people on the front line. And so there were elements that I thought, that's really good.
Do more with it. Do more with it.
Exactly. And it just felt like every little scene was independent of the entire movie. I think that's the other part that was a disappointment to me, the cohesion.
I can see what you're saying. I felt like I was watching 16 little short films.
That's what it felt like.
It didn't feel like a full movie. There's maybe one or two scenes I could see, okay, this kind of stretches into a longer film. But it's dry.
It's dry. It's very dry.
Have some coffee for this one.
That's right. 1 to 5. What's your moth rating for this movie?
This is a very light 2. I am tempted to dip this down to a 1.5, but honestly, the cinematography and the music kept the movie as a movie for me. It kept it going. It felt more cohesive with those two elements, and those were really good. I was consistently keeping my ear out for some of the music choices.
Yes, agreed.
I was consistently watching for the cinematography. Other than that, this movie was dry.
I would agree with that. I would also give it a 2. And for me, 2 and a wing feels too high. I looked through it and I said, no, a 2. Because very much like you said, the cinematography, the music was phenomenal. The directing was good, though it fell flat.
There were definitely some choices made that I think a lot of filmmakers would be afraid to choose in a movie like this.
Correct, and I would appreciate those. And the casting was good.
It's just somehow something got lost, and I think it was just these filmmakers wanted to play it safe because this is such a, I guess you could say, explosive story.
Correct, I would agree with that. Hey, Rebecca, it is that time of the show to talk about who we are not sponsored by.
What are you going to pop off with today?
As a matter of fact,
Uh-oh.
we are not sponsored by Orville Redenbacher.
The popcorn guy?
The popcorn guy. Golden popcorn guy.
You're just saying that because of the butter, right?
Oh, no. He does more than butter. So let's go back down memory lane. Orville Redenbacher actually is a real guy.
He's a real guy.
Did you know this?
No, I thought he was just like some like kind of Colonel Sanders-y looking dude.
Okay, Colonel Sanders is a real guy too.
No, but okay, Colonel Sanders is an advertising icon. So is Orville Redenbacher.
Orville Redenbacher. So 1907, right around the time my grandparents were born, Orville Redenbacher was born in Brazil.
Brazil?
Indiana.
Oh. I thought you meant like Brazil.
No. Brazil, Indiana. There is such a place. If
Okay,
you're from
I know
Brazil,
there's Paris,
Indiana.
Texas.
Oh, yeah, no, but there's Brazil, Indiana. I'm just thinking, hey, if anybody in our cinema community is from Brazil, Indiana, I'd love to hear from you. Tell
Is there a
us about
statue of Orville Redenbacher? I kind of want to know now.
in Town Square. There it is. So at 12 years old, this is the story that they're telling us all, right? So when he was 12 years old, he started growing his own corn. At 12 years
I'm
old,
trying to
were
think
you
what I
growing
was.
your...
No,
I don't think you were growing corn.
I was reading science textbooks.
Ex-
How to grow my own corn, but I wasn't actually doing it.
Well, here's the thing. He loved corn so much, he actually ultimately went to school, got his his BS degree, right, his Bachelor's of Science in Agriculture from Purdue University. Good school, actually.
Pretty good school.
The other thing that was great is they actually gave him an honorary doctorate, meaning, no, you didn't have to do the dissertation. And yeah, no.
Imagine doing all that work and to be like 15 years later going, yeah, you invented new corn, so we're just going to give you another sheet of paper.
No, he's a pretty phenomenal guy, right? He was married, he was widowed, married again. He has 2 daughters, 12 grandkids, and 10 great-grandchildren.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he's a busy guy, right? Not just popcorn. He's got the wife and the kids, got the grandkids. And he died at the age of 88, 1995, so a little after you were born, right? He passed away. Ironically, he died in his condo's jacuzzi. Had a heart attack.
Okay.
They cremated him, and the ironic part is they actually buried him at sea, even though he was in the jacuzzi.
Lived at sea, died at sea.
Lived at sea, died at sea, lived with popcorn. Rebecca, you will appreciate this. Your buddy, Roger Ebert, actually had something to say about Orville Redenbacher.
From the grave?
Well, probably not. I actually think he said it before he died.
Okay.
But he said, Roger Ebert is a man who took popcorn seriously as we take movies.
I'm glad to hear Orville Redenbacher took it that seriously.
And you think, it's just Roger Ebert. Nope. Gene Siskel said something. He said he was more than a cute advertising figure. We've established that, right? He's a real guy.
I think we did in the opening.
Did. He actually was the scientist who came up with a new strain of popcorn that kept the whole industry alive. That's a real contribution.
I didn't realize Gene Siskel took his popcorn so seriously too.
I find it hilarious that our godfathers of movies had things to say. Well, and he's right though, because in 1944 Orville Redenbacher started, creating this whole popcorn, Had a business partner, Charles Bowman. Not,
Is that where you got the bow tie?
I don't know, actually. It makes you wonder if he wore like a little blue one or something. So their goal was to create the perfect popcorn.
That's a pretty big goal.
That's a pretty big goal. And ironically, because you go, oh, what does that look like? They actually did. They created this little hybrid popcorn, and their ratio is 44 popped kernels to 1 unpopped kernel.
When you think about that in terms of like a bucket or something, that's pretty big.
Well, in 44, that's pretty amazing. So I thought, oh, okay, well, let's look into this. They have progressively gotten a little fancier with their popcorn. 1992, they launched the Smart Pop, which is 94% fat-free.
Okay.
Just in case you're looking for that. The other is they started 2007 is the natural line. It's all natural, and they say it tastes good. That's what they say. I've never tried that brand. And then we go currently. So currently they're the #1 brand of microwave popcorn and popcorn oils in the United States. Fascinating.
It's like popcorn and popcorn oils.
Well, and I laugh because they're popcorn, white popcorn, kettle corn. They have so many. Oh, and they have the little Smart line. So the Smart line is butter popcorn. It's the 94% fat free. Their whole thing is for 6 cups of popcorn. Imagine 6 cups of popcorn.
Oh wow, that's a lot.
100 calories and 0 trans fat. So they're actually trying to go healthy. They have the natural. They say they're like whole grains, which I find interesting. Some of them are simply salted, so a little bit less salt. They have some that are made with avocado oil.
It might be interested in that.
Well, yeah,
Well, that's great for our friends with nut allergies too.
Yes, and I think it's quite interesting because this is the one that I thought was kind of fun is I know when we've went to different movie theaters, they have, the little sprinkles and the little seasonings, which I actually, I'm kind of prone to. They have white cheddar, they have nacho cheese, ranch, they have movie theater butter.
Not just regular butter. Movie theater butter.
I know, they had me at a movie theater. And then they do the Cinnabon inspired, which actually sounds good. It might be too sweet, but I don't know if you can kind of sprinkle it on and you're like, tastes like a cinnamon roll. Oh.
If anybody in our cinema community has tried the cinnamon one, feel free to comment below and kind of give us a little mini review on
or
that.
any of the other ones too, because there's a whole art form to that. And then the other one, the newer one they have is the Buffalo Wild Wings.
Oh, is it an actual partnership with Buffalo?
It is actually the partnership. And same thing with Cinnabon, right? They've created these
So these are officially licensed spices. Okay, they're 20 times fast.
Yeah, right? And the thing that cracked me up too, so they have the classic bag, the little bag that we normally get. They have the mini bag, which I kind of like because sometimes the big popcorn is just like way too much for me. Too much. But then the other thing that cracked me up is they have the movie tub. So it's like a little tub and then there's a little popcorn. And so you pop it and you have like a little movie tub at your house.
Way to enhance the homegoing cinema community experience.
And retro rewinds, right? You get your little bucket. And then they have the one, I know a few weeks ago we were talking about the Kingsford charcoal.
That's correct.
They have it where you just like cut, snip, and, pop it, and then it's all in one. So your oil and everything, you don't have to buy all the extras.
That's pretty nifty.
Yeah, so I was pretty excited. I thought pretty exciting. Wish they would sponsor us because they clearly have lots of popcorn, and they love movies. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert love movies. Do you think they're sponsoring us?
Nope. We got drinks. We don't have snacks.
Yeah, exactly. So, as much as we love you, Orville Redenbacher, we sure wish you would have sponsored us.
If you enjoyed our review on Golda, please like, which helps more viewers find our cinema community, and subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming reviews. And please share with your friends. And now it's time for a Retro Rewind. This week we chose Woman in Gold.
After her early life was torn to shreds, Maria Altman left her past behind when she immigrated to America. However, after her sister's passing, Maria discovered everything that she had given up on could now be reclaimed and enlisted the help of a lawyer, Randy. When their case brings them full circle to her past, Maria must decide, is her trauma going to define her legacy or will it be her resilience?
Teresa, I know, spoiler alert, this is one of your favorite independent movies that we've gotten the privilege of seeing over the years. But I was hoping you could kind of enlighten our cinema community into more reasons why you chose this movie.
Other than that, I really like it. Yeah, no, I would say why I liked it is there is a legal aspect to it, and I like legal dramas. I will say, even if you aren't particularly prone to legal dramas, you'll still really like the movie. I know for me, the acting was powerful and the story. For those in our cinema community who aren't familiar with the story, it's about restitution, and it's about during Maria Altman's family were overtaken by the Nazis in Austria, and all of their possessions were looted, artwork, jewelry. They had to flee for their lives, and some of them lost their lives. And the whole idea of restitution from such a horrible period of time is so powerful to me. And it wasn't just the artwork that was taken. It was the story behind the artwork. It was the relationship. This is Maria's aunt, the person who was the subject for Klint's paintings. And I think that's the other part that needs to be said is, during Hitler's regime in Europe, so many pieces were burned or destroyed. And for the pieces that were taken from these people who either lost their lives or family that had lost their lives, it was so powerful that the thought of they could get these back. And the paintings represented her family. And it wasn't, this is a wonderful artist who painted something beautiful, although that is the case. It's her legacy or her family connection was taken away from her. So to me, that's very powerful.
I like this movie for a lot of the same reasons, but I think it's ultimately the hope and the promise of the past not being something to fear, even though it is a very emotionally wrought time period for Maria. Even before the war was reaching their place of living, they were still reckoning with just daily concerns. In fact, there's one scene in the movie where they talk about, yes, we're going to have a wedding, but tomorrow we die, basically.
Yes.
And I think Maria running away from her past is something that a lot of us can relate to, especially when it involves people we would rather not deal with. And for Maria, it was very tangible. There are people dying in the streets. There are people losing everything. And Maria and her family were very lucky that they had the resources not to lose as much, but they still lost something in the fact that the painting was so personal. It's not just, this is an iconic piece of art. This is an iconic piece of art that is so closely tied. And the filmmaking is very smart on this film. If you know Adele Bloch-Bauer 1, you know which painting we're talking about. It's arguably Gustav Klint's second most iconic piece of work, right behind The Kiss.
Yeah.
But the movie almost kind of teases you until you see the full painting. And I think that's kind of clever filmmaking because it elicits the emotion that way you're trying to get.
Well, and I love the part that her relationship with her aunt, right, the subject of the painting, they unpack that. And to me, I love that because there is that personal connection. There's that family connection. And as you said, running away, and that wasn't uncommon for people, during World War II that had fled or that had survived World War II that came to the United States to never speak of.
Some families that I've known don't even tell their grandkids that they lived through this.
Well, and they don't tell their children prior to that. Their children.
Suddenly we're here in America. And it's like, yeah, how'd you end up there? Well, that's awkward. We're not going to talk about that.
Correct. And you can understand that if you come from an experience of heavy trauma or you've had that, you can understand why they wouldn't want to talk about it and just have great empathy for that. So for her to pursue, and we're talking about, right, enlisting the help of an attorney to get these pictures back. And her original life did not include going after these paintings. It was only after her sister passed away, reading the letters, reconnecting with her past, then she started to have the courage to, and I would say courage. It took a lot of courage because, as you said, she had to face a lot. But any person going through the whole legal process, she actually had to go back to Austria with her attorney. She came she lived in, I think it was like Beverly Hills or right out, or no, it was Southern California. I think her attorney lives in Brentwood in Los Angeles County now. But to try to help someone understand why this is so important and so valuable, and this young attorney taking on her case for multiple years.
That's the other thing about this movie. It's very deceptive in terms of the time frame that this takes course over. You'd be forgiven for thinking that this movie only takes the course of like 3 or 4 years.
No, and it's long. It is. And the commitment on both of their parts to go through this. And the budget for this movie was actually relatively low. It was between I think 70 and 90 and made like 155 or so. Released in Austria, Germany, United States. And so I think it's a movie that needs to be told, but obviously I'm slightly biased because I believe history needs to be told.
The other thing is there's a lot of pieces in museums that have been taken.
Absolutely.
And especially in my generation and the generation now are confronting the reality that these pieces belong to people. It's not just we found them one day and decided to go for it. It's no, we took them. And we have a responsibility to acknowledge the story of these pieces, which involves that.
And I agree with that. And if our cinema community has seen Monuments Men, George Clooney directed, Matt Damon, George Clooney, I believe John Goodman was in it also. That came the year before. And that's actually based on a book as well around the recovering of such pieces.
There's a very powerful documentary that I would mention, but YouTube would flag us for it. But that is also a really interesting look. If you look up art theft, World War II, you should be able to find it.
World War II was before our time. However, the impacts have still been felt. As you said, grandparents, parents not being able to share. Of course, we think about Steven Spielberg and the Shoah Project, where he recorded countless interviews. And that was happening. I remember before you were born, they were actively seeking people to perform interviews. I know I reached out to them, and it was powerful.
I know when I was a kid, you actually, some people may argue it's traumatic, but I don't think it was for me. I think for our family, especially, it was a very necessary historical piece.
Correct.
To have a conversation that we need to. As an artist, this is really talked about in the movie, how a point of view is something that is also erased when people are taken away.
That's
not
good.
just...
That's really good.
Not just the cultural legacy, but it's also a point of view. It's also something that it's a perspective that is seen.
Well, and even in the movie, Randy, the attorney, and my understanding is the timeline's a bit different in terms of his level of awareness. But at one point in the movie, he connects with Maria, goes back to his space. His wife's pregnant, has their first child. And his then awareness comes to play where his grandparents and understand that because he's a Jewish man as well. And the connection he starts to feel with that time period and what horrors his family experienced. And you fast forward over time as they work through, coming back, trying to get the paintings. There's a part where he then starts to connect with the Los Angeles Holocaust Museum and donating to them, helping them to create a new building. He was one of their first presidents for the museum, and just seeing how he was changed. And that's the hope, right? That people start to connect with themselves, because even if you're not Jewish, you could understand being, as you said, silenced, being minimized and treated horribly in losing family. I think many people can identify with that, either living in this country or having family that has experienced that. It's really is an important dialogue to have, I think.
Well, the whole concept of erasure is just littered through this movie. Teresa mentioned Randy kind of grappling with his ancestry being tainted by this event. I thought it was a really powerful choice that the filmmakers chose to use, because I feel like a weaker filmmaker would have just been like, oh, now he cares. But instead, Maria talks about how she knew his grandfather.
Correct. That's correct. And to be clear,
And
it's not every
every
family knows every family, or
That's a
if you're
stereotype.
exactly right. If you're a therapist, you know every therapist. If you're a lawyer, you know every lawyer. That's not necessarily true, but in their situation in Austria, they did. And I think that's powerful to say, I knew your family, and I think that spoke to him.
Well, and it wasn't just, I know your family because we go to the same social events. She kindly relates to Randy several stories.
Correct.
And characteristics that kind of remind her of the family. And I think the most powerful thing this movie deals with is loss. And that's a very terrifying thing as a filmmaker to grapple with. Because on one hand, if you do it too well for the audience, they'll be overwhelmed by it.
Correct.
If you have a light touch to it, almost too light of a touch, the audience will treat it as a joke. And I don't think this movie does either. I think it finds the balance excellently.
It does it well. It does it so well, and I agree with that. I think the screenplay was phenomenal. The music, phenomenal. And I think all the pieces work together so well.
I like how this movie leads with his heart first,
yes,
and then follows with the story second.
I agree with that,
I
too.
think that makes the movie a better movie for it. It makes it less dry. It's still a dry movie, but it's a definitely more exciting, entertaining experience because I want to follow Maria on her journey more easily.
Correct. And you want to know what happens. And I know for me, as you said, it's one of the movies I really enjoy. Even though I know how it's going to go, I know what happens in the end, I still enjoy it each time. 1 to 5 moths, what do you think?
I'm going to say a 3 for this one.
A 3 for this one. Number one reason why?
It's a solid movie. There's a couple things that they chose to do, I think, that kind of dampened the movie, but it's a pretty well put together movie.
I would give it a solid 4 moth rating. I don't think it's perfect. However, I think the music comes together, cinematography, the story, the acting come together really well. But there are a few elements in my mind that are missing. It's a little bit on the longer side. I think they could have developed a few of the other characters. I know Randy's wife was pretty flat.
That was my big complaint.
Yeah.
I remember I talked with you about that.
Yeah, it just felt a little flat. So a little bit of his life outside of his relationship with Maria felt a little bit flat and not too interesting. The other part we had talked about, I know, is Maria has a large backstory, not just when she was a child and her experience there, but beyond that.
I think that would have allowed the audience to see the degree of how hard, how fast she was trying to run away from this. And I think it would have given them more insight on how powerful it was that she decided to reimmerse herself into her past life.
Correct. And I think that would have given me a 5 rating. If you've already seen Golda or The Woman in Gold and want to watch or share our review with a friend, head over to our companion channel, Cocoon Cast Clips, where we take this show and cut it up into bite-sized clips. Perfect when you're short on time or just want to share a snack-sized review with your cinema community.
It's that time of the show where we want to hear from you, our cinema community. We'd love to see you standing outside your theater with your cinema community. Please send your photo to hello@cocooncast.com. Be sure to tell us who you are, what movie you're going to see, so you can show our community your cinema spirit.
First up, KevH4755 commented on our review of Blue Beetle. Here's what he had to say. Haven't seen it yet, to be honest. I kind of have superhero fatigue at this point. Is it worth it?
I commented below, but I think a lot of our cinema community, especially in our close circle, has mentioned that superhero fatigue is a real thing with the audiences nowadays.
That's right.
I think especially if you're feeling the fatigue, maybe stepping back isn't the worst thing. I feel like if you kind of put the pause button on this and come back to it when you're feeling it, you're going to see a lot of the things that makes Blue Beetle unique in terms of other superhero movies. If you don't, it's more easy to pick up on the things that feel like you've seen every other superhero movie.
And I don't disagree with that. I would also say if you're feeling the superhero fatigue, not alone. Lots of superhero movies out there, more to come, of course. And I would say if you go in thinking superhero, you're probably going to feel the fatigue. But I know Blue Beetle, we talked about a predominantly Latino cast. We talked about a lot of the family values and that sort of thing. I would say if you go in with a different lens, you're probably going to enjoy it more. If you're not able to suspend the other aspects and the superhero part, I would agree with you, Rebecca, that maybe just take a step back. The movie will still be there if that's what you're looking to see.
And some of the creative choices, I think if you let yourself have room to breathe, you might enjoy them more.
One of our cinema community members, Joe Jetsky, responded to Kev4755's question, and here's what his comment was. Joe Jetsky said, it feels like a show you would see on the CW, if that makes sense. So if you like the CW superhero shows, you'll probably like this movie. Wasn't horrible, but it also wasn't a top-notch movie. Hopes this helps. What do you think?
I watched a lot of the CW superhero shows when they're starting out. There's very few that I have openly finished. I'm actually looking to do an entire series-wide rewatch on several of the shows, given that they cross over at some point. Mm-hmm. I think that's accurate for the average audience engagement. They're going to see it as a TV pilot. I think it's a little bit better than that.
Sure.
But I could see how that could come across that way to a lot of our cinema community.
Mm-hmm.
Not only do we want to spotlight your photos on the show by sending them to hello@cocooncast.com by Wednesday, 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we also read your comments, and we'd love to incorporate those into our show. Without your comments, we don't have engagement, and we'd love to engage with our community.
And now it's time for some Hollywood news. Rebecca.
Dune is deserting their release date. I had to say it for the pun. I had to say it.
All right, well, let's talk. Where are you reading this from?
Anthony Del Alessandro from Deadline. Say that 20 times fast.
Right. All right. What's he telling you?
Well, according to Anthony, Dune has moved its release date from this November to March 15th.
Oh, that's not great.
Well,
now, this is Dune 2.
Dune 2. Dune Part 2.
And you were looking forward to Dune Part 2, and the trailers are good.
In the shadows of Arrakis lie many secrets, but the darkest of them all may remain. The end of House Atreides.
Dune hype dies for now.
Dune hype dies.
I'm really excited because this means that there's going to be more IMAX screenings for this film. So for our cinema community who had the opportunity to see this on IMAX, better chance to get your tickets. Plus, I know what movie we're taking Dad to see on his birthday.
Because March 15th
is his birthday.
Is his actual birthday. And I don't think that's what he asked for his birthday. I think that's what maybe you would ask for your birthday. Yes, right?
Every year on our birthdays, this is a tradition in our family that whoever's birthday it is, they get to choose what movie we see that day.
And this is going to be, and he'll say, no, I don't think I want to see Dune. I think I want to see,
I would die.
Cars Part 6, Toy Story 20, something. Maybe. I think he'll pick that.
Anthony brought up an interesting point in this article, though, that there is a potential early screening in the cards for this at the Berlin Film Festival or South by Southwest. My money's on Berlin because it's
it's only going to be one. It's not going to be both.
I don't think it's going to be both.
Well, the Berlin, I think that might be, I think we're waiting until your dad's birthday.
I would be shocked if this premieres at South by Southwest. Because the reason is South by Southwest is seen as more of an independent film. I get that Dennis is kind of off the beaten path, but this is a mainstream blockbuster. Warner Brothers is really putting their cards on this being the next Star Wars for them.
Wow.
There are a lot of books in this series.
Well, but here's the problem, which we had talked about. So if Dune is pushed forward, what else is that going to be?
I discussed this with you, I believe, last night.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So with Dune's release date being bumped, that means Godzilla vs. Kong, the second one, is moving to April 12th.
Wow.
Now, that's going to bump The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim,
Okay.
the horse people.
Yeah.
That was a animated film that New Line was putting together to kind of continue the Tolkien verse a bit.
Okay.
That's going to get bumped to December 13th, 2024.
Wow. Not
And
even
then-
this year then.
No, this is where it gets interesting.
Oh.
Sony's Karate Kid is also on that December date.
Oh my.
So we're going to have a huge nostalgia fest.
Wow. All right. No, I remember that back in the day. And then what? Wonka? You're talking about Aquaman?
So Wonka is keeping its December 15th date this year.
Okay.
Aquaman is coming out December 20th. And true to tradition, the new color purple is coming out on Christmas.
Oh, it's coming out on Christmas. Oh, I remember the original. The original was wonderful. Oh,
Very sumptuous screenplay, a lot of acting, cinematography I still love.
yeah, it's
It's
great
a very
movie.
heavy topic, which is why I'm really surprised it's coming out on Christmas. The only reason I can think of it coming out on Christmas is just for enough spot in the award season to kind of give it enough theatrical
Well, and I
release
think
window.
a lot of people go to movies around the holidays.
But the color purple's not what I picture when I think of a
No,
holiday fair.
and you know, we've read the book as well as seen the movie, and correct, the topic is I don't know. Maybe I'm just biased. It just doesn't feel like it needs a reboot, but maybe in their mind it does.
The new cast might surprise us. I'm nervous because this is such an iconic story,
Sure.
but I think a new generation could appreciate some of the more nuances that were present in the original and kind of brought up subtext to text, I guess you could say.
All right, that's fair. And do we have any questions from the box?
You had said the other day that you believe, or the author believes, that it's being moved because of the writer's strike. Do you think that's a good move? Why or why not?
I'm kind of nervous about this because the first Dune is almost infamous at this point for botching some of its release strategy, what with, at the time, the HBO Max simulcast release
Oh,
and
right.
Dennis and plenty of other filmmakers coming out against this. The problem I have with this is it just keeps things going. It almost becomes a game of whack-a-mole at this point with, okay, strike's still on, let's move it. Strike's still on, move it. I think if Warner Brothers has enough confidence in their product, they should keep it going. But I also don't think it's fair to some of the creative talent to get sidelined.
So when you say keep it going, meaning holding the original release date?
Yes.
Okay. No.
There are people banking on this to make money that will make money in the afterglow.
Correct. Rebecca, our cinema community needs to know this. What's your thought around that?
I think this is almost a bellwether. You and I had talked about several movies that were bellwethers, and I said if any one of these movies moves their release date, that means the strike still has legs. This was one of the biggest ones that I'd mentioned to you.
Correct.
The other one that's going to be interesting to see is Killers of the Flower Moon.
Oh, yes, that's coming out real soon too.
If that moves, that says that the strike still has legs, and we're running out of content, especially with the strikes, some of the more independent studios questioning whether they should continue their wavered projects.
Wow. I don't think we've hit it yet.
I think we're coming closer than
I
we
think
think.
we are very... No, I don't disagree with that. I think we're getting close. I just don't think it's quite there yet.
I think we are probably within 4 more months of having content, especially because things keep getting bumped. I think a lot of studios will kind of retract some of their earlier decisions. Warner Brothers needs Aquaman, it needs Wonka, and it needs The Color Purple to hit to close this year out because they're losing so much money with the strike. Them pushing Dune is almost like a Hail Mary saying, well, we think we're going to make money next year.
Wow. Wow, just write off this year. Their business like anybody else. We lost money. We'll write it off. Rebecca, I bet you there's some strike news. I don't know. I just feel that there may be some strike news you want to share this week.
Your strike senses are tingling, aren't they?
They are tingling, tingling, tingling. Tell us exactly. All parts of me say there is strike news that Rebecca is going to tell us. Tell us what's going on.
Well, keep all of your eyes open because the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers did something drastic that nobody could have quite expected.
Oh, yeah. And you're just going to go, well, yes, exactly right. Tell us.
They actually released their proposal to the WGA for ending the strike.
Wow. And how did that go?
Burn, baby, burn.
Oh,
It did not go well.
Oof.
Both guilds are already dealing with infighting in terms of contract deals, what certain terms can be defined as part of their union. But the WGA is even more angry.
Oof. That's tough. They're already mad. They're on strike.
It's like, how could you make people more mad? This is how you do it.
By releasing this. But in my understanding, they didn't just release it to them. They released it to the public media
the greater
as well.
mass media.
Yes. What's up with that?
I think you can make the argument that one of the owners of several trade newspapers in town is part of this group.
Okay, so there's that thought. Is the thought of we're trying to win this in the public opinion?
I think that's a huge portion behind the
Okay.
decision making of this particular decision.
Wow. And the sad part is they do this, and
Now everybody knows.
everybody, and I'm sure everybody has an opinion.
Everybody's got an opinion. And I think they were hoping this would get people to pity them in terms of this.
Oof.
So I think they're kind of going for the pity public. It's like, come on, guys, haven't you striked long enough? It's like, no.
Well, and this is what third longest strike in history.
In the entertainment industry in the U.S.
Correct.
specifically, yes. This
Right,
is
the 60s, the 88 one, and then currently this one.
Yes.
Wow. Well, it's not like they're having fun, though. I did laugh that they have themes to these strikes, meaning I was reading they had like prom night strike theme.
I heard that there was a sad Cubs fans themed strike. I think it was one of the co-creators of Big Mouth.
I gotta tell you, though, I don't
that's
wanna
smart publicity.
Well, and it is because you're curious. You're driving by and you're like, why is there a disco ball hanging from a tree? And oh, that's a lot of taffeta going on, and that's shiny.
Hey, they're playing some Whitney Houston. I might want to jam to that.
Exactly. And so they're making it fun, if you will, but this isn't fun. This is livelihood. This is new shows are not coming out. New content is not coming out.
Families are not being fed.
Correct. It's a big deal.
It's a huge deal.
So they're still striking.
Still striking. And if you're curious, you can actually read the details online. A lot of the major entertainment websites actually have the full details of the proposal.
All right. So if you're curious, we're not going to unpack it too much, but I would love
For
to hear.
your sanity, I will not unpack it.
I would love to hear our cinema community and what they have to say about it. If they've read the proposal, thoughts on the proposal, or just even they've been on strike for a while. How are you feeling about this for these people?
I'd also like to see our cinema community comment below. What's a strike line idea that you're curious about? If you were on strike, what theme would you go for?
That's fascinating. I just had never thought about if I'm on strike, though my profession doesn't really strike that often.
They do, but
They do not necessarily where I'm at, right? But if you were to strike, having a theme is just fascinating to me. I just had never thought about that. And I was reading that. I'm like, they have themes and not just like generic themes like, oh, we're all going to wear green today, right? Like when you go to the dentist office, they're all wearing blue or green or something. It's like, no. We have like legitimate themes. We've got
people in the entertainment profession. They want to entertain.
Well, and that tells you something, correct? That they really are not having a good time with this and their calling is getting pushed in the back seat of, well, not quite yet.
I can't tell you how many signs I've seen to the effect of, you could be paying me for this sign right now.
Oh, I love the signs. I love the signs. And like you said, people are struggling. Families are struggling. So we don't want to minimize that part.
No.
That's a real, and we make light and we tease. But the real piece is these are people that have jobs that they love, that they've worked hard at, and they're not getting
this is an entire creative industry. It's not just one or two people or a select group of people. Because SAG-AFTRA joined after the Directors Guild kind of arguably flaked to create their own terms.
Correct.
This becomes almost all of the American film industry, especially pocketed in California, is heavily feeling this.
Correct, in the whole state.
And arguably, the film industry is California's greatest export, too, to
that's
the
a good
rest of the
point.
global community.
Well, and they film in different places, different countries, different states. The whole ripple effect is quite amazing.
And if you're in line at the strike, send in some video footage. We'd love to feature you and your line on CocoonCast. Send it to hello@cocooncast.com.
Thanks for joining us this week. We're always excited to create experiences to bring our cinema community together.
Next week, we're excited to be bringing you a special show. We're not going to tell you anything about it, except for you have to tune in to see what it is.
Ooh. Please remember to like, subscribe, and to share our channel.
If you enjoyed the show, you might want to check out last week where we reviewed The Blue Beetle and Shazam.
Remember, cinema community, movies are
Better together.
See you next week. Thanks for watching.